Okay, folks, chapter 15, moving out of Western art and into what's considered non Western art. And more specifically, in chapter 15, is South and Southeast Asia before 1200 CE. So, as we've been doing with these chapters, there are abbreviations. Again, there could be a whole entire art history course just taught on South and Southeast Asia art, probably a couple of semesters worth of, and that goes for any other region that we're going to be discussing in this latter part of the semester. Is again, these classes could easily be there. I mean, this information from these individual chapters could very easily be their whole entire semester worth of discourse. So keep that in mind. And whenever you end up transferring to that 4 year school, that 4 year university, look into that. So jump into the art history sections that are available, and if there's anything in this survey course that we've been talking about that you want to know more specifically about, then try to see if that specific course is going to be offered during that latter 2 years of that baccalaureate degree from the degree that you're working on now. Okay. So, chapter 15 and map 15.1, and it's going to show you what areas we're looking at particular. Majority is going to be India over to Thailand and into Malaysia and Indonesia. And a lot of these areas are going to be heavily influenced before 1200 by Hinduism in particular coming out of India. And of course, there will be heavy influences of Islam as well. Once Islam has spread its empire over to the east, and make its way into India and convert many Hindus into Muslims, and then also down into Indonesia and Malaysia in particular, and Malaysia as well as parts of Spain are heavily populated with Muslim and Islamic beliefs. So that has held tightly in Malaysia in particular. Malaysia actually means the place of sandalwood. So it was known for its ability to produce lots of sandalwood, and that sandalwood was used in incense and pulps and such prior to the introduction of Islam in this area. And a lot of those trades between India and Malaysia were based off of sandalwood, which is an essential oil, I believe, some kind of fragrance coming from the sandalwood tree. So it was a very important area at this time whenever it came to that type of trade. And in India, the use of sandalwood is heavily used. So this is the area that we're going to be looking at. And we're going to be talking about in particular what's called the stupa, or the Great Stupa. And I'll go into more specifics on what that is. And then we're going to talk about like some different details in regards to the stupa. And also what's called a temple. So we've been talking about churches and cathedrals and such, and we're going to be looking at what the temple structures look like here in South and Southeast Asia. All right, and you'll see some differences, but you'll see some similarities as well in regards to some of the Western art that we've been talking about, dating all the way back to Mesopotamia in particular. Okay, so your first figure is going to be 15.1, and this is what we call the Great Stupa, right? And it's in Sashi, India, and it's a sanctuary. Okay, a stupa is a sanctuary, and it has that circular mound-like feature to it. And you should, when you see this, be able to relate it to some of like the hemispherical shapes that we've seen with the Romans, as well as with the Etruscans, and even some areas of Mesopotamia. So this element of this hemispherical, half-spherical like design is very much carried around the world in different times. And this is 3rd century BCE. So we're going all the way back to before Common Era. All right, so a long time ago. So what was happening in 3rd century BCE? Well, that's the Hellenistic time of Greece, and that's also the time that the Romans are coming out of their republic and moving into their empire. Okay, so that's the transitional point of what's going on in Greece and Rome at that time. And so the Greek Empire is coming slowly to an end. Alexander the Great dies, and then the Roman Empire is slowly building up from its republic. So this is what's being developed over here in South and Southeast Asia and India and Indonesia areas in particular during that same time. The stupa also houses relics, just like we talked about whenever it comes to the basilicas with the transepts, right, which house the relics of holy individuals coming from, the folks that are promoting Christianity, and their relics and their gatherings and their garments and everything that was their paraphernalia is all being housed in the relics inside the transepts of these basilicas. And then here it's the relics of the Buddha. Okay, the relics of the Buddha are within the confines. Sorry, folks. Within the confines of the Great Stupa. All right, so again, a similarity but different. And the reason I'm giving you all this is I want you to be able to compare and contrast. That's really what a lot of this discussion is going to be about, to be able to look at the Western and then see how there are similarities. And I'm a big fan and a big proponent of seeing similarities around the world. Not necessarily saying that these Western art ideas influenced this. No, they happened at the same time, and it's human. It's human desire and design to want to create these specific types of designs and features. It's not like they're always influenced by someone else. It's human nature to want to do this, and that's really what I want to end on this semester, is to show you that throughout the world we're all in this together, and we're all doing this at the same time, and that's kind of evident here with the Great Stupa. So very much like in those basilicas. So the relics are here within this burial tomb, the Great Stupa, and you cannot enter it. Okay, there's no entering the stupa. Okay, it's completely sealed off. You cannot. So you have to do something to worship it. Instead of entering, you have to do what's called circumambulation. That's Circumambulation. Circumambulation. And what it is it's clockwise. You walk the grounds on the outside of the stupa clockwise. Okay? And there's prayer wheels and all kinds of different features that are present around the stupa. And you are rotating clockwise to give this element of sacred prayer in a clockwise fashion. The reason why you do it in a clockwise motion with prayers and chants is because that, according to the astronomy and astrology of the South and Southeastern, or what are called Vedic astrology, VEDIC, is that the universe and all the multi-universes rotate in a clockwise motion. Like the planets, they rotate around the sun in a clockwise motion. The sun actually, according to them, rotates around the North Star, what's called Polaris, and their name for it is Dhruva Loka. Dhruva Loka. Loka means planet. So the North Star is considered a luminary or a planet, and the sun rotates around Dhruva Loka, or the pole star, or the North Star. Okay, so the sun actually rotates as well. Then that is the main core of this one universe, and they believe in infinite amount of universes. So that is kind of like the nucleus of this universe, the North Star. And then we're all in this like big electron cloud within that like core epicenter of the universe, that nexus of the universe. So by rotating clockwise around the stupa, it keeps you in sync with universal law or universal activity. Okay, so that's why you do the circumambulation clockwise. To connect with the cosmos is what they call it. Cosmos. C-O-S-M-O-S. Cosmos. Okay. And this great stupa is actually meant to be a map of this one singular universe. And to break it down, we're going to look at figure 15.8. Excuse me, figure 15.8. And this breaks down all the different elements of the stupa. And I'm going to describe a couple of the main features that I need you to know that corroborates that this is supposed to be a hemispherical map of the universe. Okay. So with the Sashi's Great Stupa, we have what's called the Torana. All right, so find the Toranas. You have a Western Torana, you have a South and an Eastern Torana in the figure. You can't see the Northern because it's on the other side of the stupa, but it's there. So 4 points. And what are these 4 points again? These are the cardinal points. Where did we see this before? We saw this with the minarets on the old the mosque during the late Islamic art period. Okay, now this is way before those mosques. This is way before those mosques. Okay, but it's the same concept, and you can see that these different Toranas are different cardinal points, and according to the believers in South and Southeast Asia, the world is made up. This universe is made up of 4 points, four cardinal directions. Then there are other universes out there, multi-universes, that have more points of directions, like 8 or 16 or 32 or 64. And they're more and more complex. And they believe that this universe that we reside in is a very young universe. It is not old. And it's indicated by the number of cardinal points. Only 4. Okay? So, and it's also speculated on without any discussion, really, that there is a universe that's even younger than ours that only has 2 points. Okay? But the 4 is based off of the youth of the universe in which we're living. All right? So that's what those cardinal points are meant to help represent. And again, be able to see that those cardinal points are noticed in the Islamic mosques, the late Islamic mosques, as well as the pyramids. The pyramids, remember, had the 4 plane, equilateral planes, and they all pointed to 1. And that, again, is an emphasis on cardinal points. So that's going to be something that we can compare and contrast as well. The stupa itself, the stupa dome, is meant to be a worldly mountain. Okay, so it's meant to represent the spiritual in the material. So within those Torana, those 4 points, and that gateway, that stone fence that separates the stupa from the outer world, that inner dome within those Torana and that fence is meant to be a spiritual mountain representation of the earth, signifying that in this material world, in this material plane, you can become spiritual. You can become a spiritual entity. Hence the Buddha, hence nirvana, hence all these levels of meditative enlightenment. So you can become a spiritual being here in this material world through these different degrees of worship and focus. So that's what the stupa dome is itself, a worldly mountain. The Harmika, which is the location of the gods. So the Harmika is above the stupa dome. All right? The Harmika. And that's supposed to be the location of what are called demigods. Not God, demigods. They actually do believe in one God. And that one God's name is often used as Vishnu or Rama or Krishna. Okay? And I can kind of talk about that a little bit more here in a little bit. But the Harmika is supposed to be the area of harmony, right? Harmika, harmony, harmonious. And it's meant to be where all of these different representatives of different elemental controls in the universe reside, like one of thunder, one of rain, one of sun, one of moon, one of wind, one of love, one of lust, and all these different things. And they're meant to reside there. And those names are like Kama for lust. You think of Kama Sutra, Kama for lust. which also can be converted to Rati, which is the worshiping of love. Indra, the worshiping of thunder and rain. Surya, the worshiper of God, the demigod of sun. Chandra, the demigod of the moon. Vayu, of the wind. Varuna, of the water, of the ocean's water. So they all live within this heavenly realm, or this harmonious realm, and then place their representation on behalf of a singular God upon the earth itself. Okay? So that's what the Harmika is. It's supposed to be the location of these demigods. Not God, but demigods. Then there's the Yasti, which is the axle of the universe. All right? And that's what's coming up through the Harmika, almost like an antenna. All right? And then the chatras are like the upper levels beyond this harmonious heavenly realm, and it goes all the way back to the source of that pole star, that middle star in the universe, and all of this is pivoting off of that little kind of mushroom-like cap that you see at the top of the Yasti. You have 3 different tiers, okay? And it's those chadras are all based off of these higher levels of spiritual existence beyond the material world. Okay, the Harmika is the last material, ethereal, more mind subtle based of existence, and then everything above that is at the spiritual realm. Okay, and that's what the chatras are. The chatras. And then I talked about the fence, which is down low, the stone fence, which is supposed to be a placeholder to prevent any profanities from entering the shrine. And that doesn't mean profanities verbally, that means physically. If you're dirty, then you can't, there's no entering. And all that, you have to be cleansed before you could enter the grounds outside of the stupa dome. All right, and there are priests and what are called sadhus and monks that are able to enter this stupa dome, and but the stone fence is supposed to be this metaphoric element that is very physical in presence to prevent any level of profanity from entering the great stupa. All right. So now let's look at a detail. I want to look at the East Torana detail. So we have that in figure 15.9. 15.9. And what the Torana is supposed to represent is, again, fertility and vegetation. So having fertility and vegetation in this material world, which are requirements to keep body and soul together, according to them. So without proper food and without proper propagation, then you have no health. You have no material health. So the Torana is supposed to represent the importance of spiritualized fertility and spiritualized vegetation. So that means the food in which you grow and make and prepare, and the fertility of children is supposed to be dovetailed towards spiritual progress. So the Torana is supposed to be 4 different cardinal points to emphasize that in all directions. Not just in one singular unilateral direction, but in multiple directions, all the way around the world. That's why it has the hemispherical presence, the stupa dome itself. So it represents fertility and vegetation. And where did we see this? We saw this in the Neolithic period, all right, all the way dating back to different cave paintings and sculptures and relief carvings that show the importance, and all the way back to Paleolithic with the Venus of Willendorf, and the importance of this fertility and of the vegetation and the agriculture and the growth of vegetation. So these are all happening in different pockets of the world. This is 1st century CE, so this is a little bit later, okay, whenever it comes to this making of the East Torana of the Great Stupa. Okay, then there's also the statuary sculptures, and also, let me see, let me not go too far too fast. So the statuary sculptures we can see with figure 15.10. 15.10, this is the Yakshi, okay? And again, you can see the emphasis, and this is on the Torana. You can see the emphasis of fertility, right? There are different features here within the body of the Yakshi that indicates the importance of fertility, personified in this feminine form. All right, so again, this is not anything new. We've seen these before. These are almost life size at 5 feet high, just the Yakshi herself. But you should be able to look at this and see how different things are featured a little differently in regards to fertility. There's the very obvious in the genitalia and within the mammary glands are the thoracic area of the Yakshi, but also the way in which her hip is bent as if she's dancing in this sense of provocation to give a focus on fertility. You can see that there's a cut in her side, in her midriff, that gives an emphasis on that very sharp kind of angle that emphasizes sensuality. Okay, this is something that the Greeks did. All right, so be able to compare and contrast like the contrapposto that we saw with the Greeks and that of the movement of the Yakshi present in figure 15.10. She's also supposed to reflect the Buddha's mother who gave birth under a similar tree. So she's under what's called a nimbai tree or a neem tree, which is the tree that brought its branch down, and the mother, I think Maya was her name, that held onto the branch and had a very easy birth with Buddha. And at that time he was a prince, and his name was Siddhartha. So this tree is supposed to represent, that she has her hand up in, is supposed to represent, again, not sexual fertility, but the fertility of spiritual progression. Okay, it's a very spiritual approach using material understanding. Okay, and Buddha, he as Siddhartha, he was born speaking and had lotus blossoms on the ground walking behind him. So these are all representations of the story of Buddha. These Torana tell these stories. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I want to jump down into another temple, another type of temple, and we're going to look at figure 15.20. 15.20. And it's still in India, but even though we're focusing on India, this is going to be spread throughout a lot of Indonesia as well as other areas in the southeast. Okay, so whenever you look at the PowerPoint, you're going to see a lot of similarities in different areas. Again, if I had an entire semester to cover South and Southeast Asian art, I would, because it's one of my favorites. So is Mesoamerican art, and so is the Mesopotamian Egyptian art, in particular Northern Africa and down all the way to Ethiopia. But that's not what we're doing in this course. Hopefully I can entice you to find another instructor that is able to do that somewhere else. Or at least research it yourself, right? Okay, so this is called the Vishnu Temple. And again, Vishnu is one of the names of this singular God, this one God. And Krishna as well as Rama are also other names for God. And Vishnu is actually what is called an avatar, A-V-A-T-A-R, an avatar, which is a spiritual expansion of God. And the concept is that God is not necessarily just one, even though he is. He can expand himself infinitely because he's omnipotent and omniscient and omnipresent. And he does it through what are called avatars. There are spiritual avatars and there are material avatars. But the material avatars, like Vishnu, are unaffected by the material world, though they reside in it. It's kind of like the whole concept of what a monk, what a nun, what a priest, what a sadhu, what a monk, I already said that, what any worshiper of God is attempting to do. And that is to constantly be in God consciousness, meaning that they're doing the best that they can under what they've been taught to keep their minds clear of any sin or any aggression or anything that is supposed to be connected with the material agitations and material anxieties of the world. So these avatars are supposed to be exemplary figures to show individuals how to lead a life so that even though they're still in the material world, their minds and their hearts and their souls and their bodies are always thinking about God. Okay? That's the concept behind the avatar. So this is a Vishnu temple. And real quick, it's a dry masonry that was about 40 feet tall. Now, obviously, you got some rubble on the top, so its true height is not present in this image of 15.20, but it was originally 40 feet tall. And again, it just towered up towards the cosmos to indicate the worshiping element of things coming down from the sky or the cosmos and finding its way into the temple and then kind of expanding its religious effulgence upon the worshippers of Vishnu. All right. It has, so dry masonry again is the stacking of stone without any mortar. Okay. And we talked about that a little bit in regards to the ziggurats of Mesopotamia. And they started using the bitumen to cover the surface. So be able to compare and contrast this Vishnu temple with the dry masonry of the ziggurats that we saw in Mesopotamia. And also the great stupa is dry masonry as well. So all interlocking stones. It has relief carvings. You can see if you zoom in, and we'll look at a detail here in a minute. In the center of the temple will be Vishnu lying reposed in what's called the causal ocean, which is the ocean of milk in which all existence comes boiling or bubbling up from. Scientists would call this like the Big Bang, and I'll talk about that here in a second. So they have sculpted guardians that were in front of the doorways, and we saw that with the Hittites in Turkey during the Mesopotamian time, the Lamassu, which were the big hybrid lion and eagle with the Mesopotamian king's face in the front, like these guardians, like the Hittites, and these Vishnu temples throughout this part of the world also had these types of guardians in the front, okay, kind of hybrid, lion-like hybrid guardians. So again, kind of all popping up in different parts of the world at one time. Those were, remember, the Lamassu were like the half-winged lion and half-man with the kind of eagle-like features involved as well, kind of like a chimera. So let's look at what this looks like in figure 15.21, and I'll leave you at that with this video. But one thing before I talk about what the narrative actually is there is a style that we call this, and it's called the Gupta style. Gupta, Gupta. So we started with stupa, with the dome, and with the sacred dome structure of the stupa, and we're ending with the Gupta. All right, so this is a Gupta style. So if I would ask you what is a Gupta style, you should be able to refer to figure 15.21, Vishnu asleep on the serpent Ananta, and be able to explain that it means smooth body styles, meaning very smooth, no texture, very soft and rounded, very voluminous and luxurious looking with its rounded features. And also the garments are going to look wet and clingy. All right, they're going to look like you've thrown a water on the garments and they're sticking to the bodies. And you can see that overall, like Vishnu, who's the center figure, laying reposed with his hand upon his head and his crown, is very smooth and very rounded. All right, very conical in nature. There's not a lot of like hard, angular, masculine lines. It's very almost effeminate, if you will. And then they believe that God actually is is the potent and the potency, the masculine and the feminine combined. Okay, he can't be one without the other kind of idea. But you can see the wet, clinging garments down in the lower registration, which is that of the what are called the Apsaras and Gandharvas. And the Apsaras are like the dancers, and the Gandharvas are like the musicians. So the bottom right corner of figure 1521, within the relief, you can see where the garments of the feminine form, which is the Apsara, is clinging to her lower body. All right. So that's how we know that it's a Gupta style. All right. So be able to know that. So real quick, I'll leave with the narrative, and what's happening here is this is the creation of the universe, and it is Vishnu resting upon the serpent Ananta, and according to their lore and their thoughts and beliefs, that Vishnu is present within this universe at the bottom of the universe upon what's called the causal ocean, and he's in a slight slumbered state, and everything that's occurring in a way is like the Matrix. Everything that's occurring in the universe has happened before. They believe in reincarnation, not just in reincarnation of each individual, but reincarnation of entire universes. They repeat a similar story every time they are destroyed, and then they Big Bang back out. So it's their belief that the Big Bang is actually the time in which Vishnu woke up a little bit and impregnated the universe with design and creation. And that is now under the power of attorney, if you will, with an individual called Brahma, who's coming out of his navel on an umbilical cord, who's in the center top, looks like he's floating on a cloud, and he's the chief engineer of the universe. He takes all the components that are given to him by Vishnu and arranges them, and then delegates different individuals to propagate the universe. It's their belief that everything was born at the same time. Humans, trees, weeds, this, that, everything started at the exact same time. So the idea of evolution is kind of null and void according to this standard of belief. And as he is resting, he's maintaining the universe through his representatives, which are the demigods. Okay, so they're doing these different jobs, and the example that I always use is like the president. The president isn't out there in every place in the world or in the country trying to do everything. He has representatives in different state departments, federal departments, national departments, to get things done and then funnel back up to him for information. He has ministers and representatives that do that. It's kind of the same concept. So their belief is that God, snaps his finger, looks, impregnates, gets the world started, gets the universe started, and then allows his representatives to continue it, like a CEO of a business, so to speak. Like, I hate to compare this, but like Jeff, whatever his name is, of Amazon. It's now all these other people are going to do it, and the money will just keep coming into his bank account. Poor, crude example, but I think it's valid. And then what will happen is there's a last individual at the very end that he'll delegate by the name of Shiva, who will do a dance to destroy the universe. Then the universe will reabsorb back into Vishnu's navel, and then it will stay unmanifested or asleep until it's time for the next Big Bang. So it's personifying and giving a personal touch to a lot of what scientists are already saying. Okay? So that's the narrative behind Vishnu asleep on the serpent Ananta. And Ananta means pure bliss and knowledge. And this serpent is hooded over him for A, protection, and B, to constantly tell the stories of the ones that are worshiping him. So it's like a megaphone or a cell phone or a smartphone to Vishnu to let him know all of these people in the world are worshiping you, and this is how they're worshiping you. So that's what the hissing of the Ananta snake is doing, is informing Vishnu of his praise and the means in which everyone chooses or doesn't choose to worship God. Okay, and in their view, by the name of Vishnu, and then ultimately all the way up to the name of Krishna in the spiritual world. Okay? This is not a theology class, so I'm not going to get into that too much, just trying to give you a basis of context. All right, folks, that is chapter 15. I'll leave it at that, and then we'll break up the next few chapters here in the next video. All right.